Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. We kind of gave you guys a heads up last week and warned you guys. Our podcast is available on Spotify and iTunes, and everything is also now being recorded live and can be seen on YouTube and our Facebook page and everything like that. So you guys get to see the ugly faces behind this voices. I am your host, Timuchin, as always, and with me we have our usual trio, starting with Gally. Gally, what's going on, man?
What's happening, guys? Always good to have a Monday off. Appreciate Labor Day.
Oh man, don't say that. I had to freaking work today. I had some like catching up to do. So that's the joys of working from home and doing your own thing, I guess. But with us, as always, the hardest working guy ever is Mr. Paul Bickler's with us. Paul, what's happening?
Listen, you got a lot of stones bringing me in on a national drinking holiday, but I was promised time and a half, so here I am.
But you're still drinking, so what's the difference? We're all good here. So, a lot to talk about. Normally, on an international break week, we're kind of like spending our entire time praying that nobody gets injured and everybody gets to come back. But this has been an odd week of international football, soccer, and it's not even over yet. So we got another batch of games coming up starting tomorrow and Wednesday. So let's get to them real quick, kind of like go one by one. I kind of want to see what you guys thought of it. First off, obviously, let's address the scare issue. Both Minamino and Elliott had injury scares this week, and the panic gang was out. But sounds like both of them were precautionary. Minamino is not meant to be, told to be as serious, I guess. And same for Elliott. He was kind of like taken out of the squad just as a precautionary measure. But I would think it would probably rule them out of the Leeds game automatically if they were going to be involved. I don't think Minamino was going to be involved anyway. Elliott possibly, but at least so far, so good in terms of avoiding any major injuries. But we have weirder stories to get to, starting with Naby Keita getting stuck due to a military coup and not being able to travel back. I have not heard anything yet as of this recording here. He's still there, correct? Liverpool said, he's safe and everything, but he still has not left and headed back home. Have you guys heard anything else?
No, I haven't heard anything else.
I mean, that is a freaking odd story, and it's kind of scary. I mean, I know it's almost like what the hell kind of a story in some ways, but having grown up in Turkey and having seen one of those military things, it's no fun. Well, actually, scratch that. It's fun for a kid because what happens is nobody can go out, so you can go out in the streets and play soccer in the freaking wide ass street where there would normally be like a 2-lane traffic, but I was a kid. For the adults, not as much fun from what I understand. But does that affect anything, do you think, in terms of his fitness and being ready to go, Paul, if needed against Leeds?
I mean, I have no idea because I don't know what the travel restrictions are. Like, will he even be back in time? Like, I mean, generally they want those guys within 48 hours, you know what I mean? And like, we don't have any timeline on when he's going to be back, right? So if he doesn't leave, I would think if he doesn't leave Gambia by Friday, like, I mean, there's no way. But like, I don't know. I gotta imagine by then we will have sent in like SEAL Team 6 or somebody to get him. But like, I'm sure that we'll figure out a way to get him back. But I don't have any way of knowing that for sure. I mean, that situation's wild, dude. I mean, Africa does that, right? Like they have these military coups in all these different countries. If there's not an active genocide going on, it's just wild. So. Who knows? I'm like, I wish I was more knowledgeable and more up to date on that situation, but I'm not.
It's like I say, it's just like an odd thing. We've seen all kinds of stuff like this where, injuries, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think I've ever heard of this before for a player that we sent to international duty not being able to come back. So it's just an odd story. What, like I say, this international break has been nothing but odd stories. And perhaps the oddest one is this Brazil-Argentina game. So there has to be a lot of like behind the scene politic power battles and stuff like that for this to happen. I'm sure everybody kind of knows what has happened so far, where the game got postponed and they came in and took away Argentina players like in the 5th minute of the game. Gally, what do you make of this mess?
Well, that's exactly what it was. It was an absolute mess. I mean, the idea that they stopped a match 5-6 minutes in with health officials on the pitch like they were the FBI or the CIA coming in to just take and just usher specific players off. Obviously, like Messi said, they were training in the country for 3 days. At any point, they could have come and spoken to them. I guess they waited, and as soon as they saw that they were brazenly just avoiding the rules or misinterpreting them to their advantage, they decided to halt the play. But they could have just as easily let the match played out and then asked them to have the match abandoned at that point. I guess they were going to say they were doing it for health and safety. But let's be real. If those were 3 Premier League players playing for Chile, I'm not sure that action would have been taken with that much theater on the pitch. I think it had a lot to do that was Argentina, and the fact that Brazil was angry, their players weren't there. And if Argentina's players were there, the match wasn't going to happen.
Which... that's what's odd, isn't it? Like, I mean, they kind of had to know these guys were in the country. And I realized, they're like, oh, they didn't put it on the form and stuff. I mean, seriously, you guys didn't know? I mean, you would think as they prepare for the game, they're going to be like, hey, we don't have these guys because they play in England, but they're not going to have these guys. Wait, what? They have them? How is that possible? I mean, why wouldn't that just come up? The only thing that was odd to me is, okay, let's say they're like, oh, shit, I didn't know they were playing in England. And then they realize it. So did the Argentina, like the crew, have an idea that they were coming? Because they're saying their story is the reason they did it on the field is they went to the locker room and the locker room door was locked. Like, did they not knock? Did Argentina like, don't open the freaking door? It's the health guys. Like, we're gonna come out and play. Nobody make a sound. We're not here, kind of thing. So I just didn't understand that entire story of our door was locked, so we had to go out and get him on the field. I mean, it's not like they got teleported onto the field. Why can't you just get him in the tunnel? What do you make of this, Paul? I figured you would be all over this story.
Honestly, man, because it falls in the window of international break, I tried to know as little details as possible about it. But what my takeaway was very similar to you guys. I mean, clearly the Brazilian Football Federation has had their fucking tail up, and they've been pissy for weeks now. I mean, like, they went where they wanted FIFA to impose that 5-day ban on Brazilian players, meaning they would miss matches coming back to the Premier League because they're pissy that, like, the Premier League was not going to send players to red level countries. And so, when it didn't, it feels like they weren't able to get anywhere with FIFA. So they were like, how can we retroactively fuck with Argentina? Like, they hate each other. Those countries hate each other. Like, it feels like they waited till that match came to the point where it was going to be kickoff, and then they made a stink and they had that thing happen. But I mean, I'm sure there's details out there that will like shed more light on this as we get more information. But it just feels like the Brazilian Football Federation was just out to fucking intentionally make a mess of something, right? It's like when I don't know, man. It's like when you're out playing ball with people and somebody comes late and they want to join and they can't. They come in and fuck the game up for everybody. That's what it feels like. It feels like Brazil was like, all right, if we're not going to have our best guys in, then we're going to screw this up for Argentina too, and we're not going to play at all.
I almost thought, the way it sounded like
more about me.
The federation was like, oh yeah, you know what? The whole confusion is obviously coming from the fact that they just had Copa America there, and they had kind of like, bent some of the rules to be able to get that thing rolling and the cup still be played. So Argentina is like, oh, we thought it was still those rules kind of thing, and that's why they sent their guys. I guess the thing is, it sounds like the Brazilian Federation was like, yeah, that's cool. We just did it last month. Go ahead. But then the health department is like, hell no. And that's why I thought there was some kind of like a political battle in the background. Like, nope, I make the COVID rules around here kind of deal. But it was just odd. I mean, another thing that I don't think I've ever seen. Usually when the game gets postponed, it's for like crowd trouble or lightning or some crap like that. I've never seen like health officials coming in and like trying to like, arrest guys and just like haul them away, and say it was just like weird. But
like a stack of zip ties, man.
So to go along with that, another odd story is probably Van Dijk doing his Heisman impression on this guy coming in to trying to get a picture taken. What do you make of that, Gally? I mean, I just felt like it's like, dude, I don't know where you're coming, and I almost feel like under normal conditions it would not be as much of a Heisman shove, a stiff arm, but with COVID and everything going on, it's like the last thing you need is having contact with a dude that you're not supposed to.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. The fact that he just got a stiff arm is very lucky for the man in the photo with the hoodie, because he could have got a right hook. He could have got security could have got him. I mean, honestly, we talked about it in our Discord chat. There have been a lot of these instances in sports where it hasn't been a person with a camera. The Monica Seles instance years and years ago in the tennis match comes to mind. And I just think the fact that you can see it in Virgil's face, he handles it with class, and that's what he does. But he was frustrated. Like, what are you doing? Get out of here. He's a professional doing his job. And they don't love talking to these media moments after matches and before matches. They want to do their job and get the recovery they need. And I think the fact that in 2021, people are still running up to get selfies, I will assume there was an alcoholic beverage or two partaken that led to the idea that this was good. And for that, I guess I'll give him a pass on, as Paul said, this federal drinking holiday. But it was a bonehead move all the way around. And I'm happy it was a phone and not some other type of weapon in his hand.
I mean, the good thing is, calm as you like, he just kept going. Like, he just shoved the guy out of the way and quick to answer him the question. And like you say, it's not a kind of like joy for these guys to be doing this in the first place, especially after a result that, was not ideal for them. What do you make of it, Paul? I mean, what's your take? It was kind of like odd because I read online, like, people normally saying, oh, what happened, like he's just a fan and stuff. But I really feel the fact that the COVID deal makes it a bigger deal than just a fan coming in to try to get a picture.
Yeah, two things stick out to me. I didn't really think, oh, COVID, like that wasn't my initial reaction. Like, the two things that struck me was like, as an American, you would never see this shit happen post game. Like, there's just too much security. Like, we've had too many instances in this country. Like, you would just never be able to see somebody like that get that close to a high-profile athlete in a post-game interview. Secondly, like, if you just listen to the audio and you don't see any of this go down, Van Dijk doesn't even, like, you don't even know anything happened. Like, he just does it's insane. Like, how he doesn't, literally there's no pause in the audio. It's wild. Yeah, man, like, look, if you're in the middle of doing an interview post-match and you're answering a question, you're in the middle of answering a question, I got to believe that somebody coming in your peripheral at you is kind of scary. Like, and that's my takeaway is, like, that's got to be pretty scary for an athlete. Like, I mean, not to say that they're expecting something bad, but you don't know. Like, you don't know. And, like, I think that he could have handled that about as well as he could have. And the people that are like, oh, like, you should have stopped and, like, acknowledge the fan, that's just insane. Like, you're not discouraging that behavior from happening again if you do that. And second of all, I just don't think that's a natural reaction to somebody surprising you in the middle of something, like a space that is supposed to be yours.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't like, like Galley's saying. I mean, if you turn around and just like swung at him, that'd be one thing. But it was just like, man, get off me, not now, kind of deal. And then just kind of like pushed him away. I thought it was just like, I mean, it sounded. This was, I think, one of the first things to come out of this international break. And it was like, that's weird. But with all the other stuff we just covered, this was like kind of like nothing at the end. So before we get to the weekend's game, and obviously there's a bunch of games coming up on our way, and the Champions League, I don't think we ever got a chance to kind of like talk about the groups and how we ended up in this group and what you guys thought. I mean, it wasn't ideal. I guess it could be worse. I just felt like overall it is going to be like a tough group, but kind of like want to get your guys' take on it and what you guys kind of forecast us doing. So, Gally, let's start with you. What do you make of like this Group B?
Well, is it tougher than the Europa League group of Group G? Yes, clearly. That's, you look at some of these groups and the balls came out and it was a top-heavy draw. Groups A and B are by far the two toughest groups, in my opinion. I think we'll do fine, and I do believe we'll advance. I think AC Milan is probably in this tournament a year or two early. They had a good campaign last year, but they hung on to finish fourth in Italy and just barely squeak in or third. So I think that they're going to really struggle. And we usually have our way with Porto, both home and away. So I think, we can get a result against Atletico. I'm okay with this group that way. It's just there won't be any dead rubbers come the end of this group stage by any means. We'll be playing meaningful nights in Europe all the way through.
How about you, Paul? What's your take on this group here?
I think it falls somewhere in the middle. I mean, I don't think it's an easy group, but I don't think it's super tough. I mean, I don't love to see Atletico, right? I mean, but I got to say, if you're going to get a team that plays you traditionally tough and is tactically very tough to play against, at least you're playing a team that you've got plenty of motivation to beat, right? I mean, we should have all the motivation in the world to beat the pants off Atletico. And if you look at the group, like, Gally said, traditionally we've been very strong against the Portuguese teams. AC Milan, I agree with Gally. They're not probably as good as they were last season. I think, they're a little bit weakened. And when you look at this, there's no real travel nightmares, which is nice. I mean, I much prefer this group than having to go all the way to the Ukraine or Russia or any of those sort of far-reaching places that are kind of tough, to go play.
I think the main thing that I was worried about and like wasn't too big on is the fact that, there are not going to be a lot of games where we can say, I mean, like we had last year, I guess, where we got Jota injured. That's a different story. But at least, like the potential to have, I mean, in terms of the schedule, we first play with Milan at home, then we go to Porto, then kind of like a back-to-back with Atletico Madrid. I mean, the only way I can see it is, almost like going 3 wins and a draw or, 4 wins for us to be able to kind of like, rest or, like rest some people at least against Porto at home and stuff. Do you envision that happening at all, Gally?
We'll have to see. I mean, Liverpool notoriously doesn't play well on their away legs in Italy. It doesn't really matter who they're playing or when. So that Milan match, is that first one on the road or is that first one at Anfield? I can't remember on the schedule.
First one is home, looks like.
First one's at home. That's good. That gives us a much better chance of winning that match. I feel confident we can get a win against Porto. I just think it's all going to come down to the Atletico Madrid games. And I don't mean it's going to come down to advancing. It's going to come down to whether or not matches 5 and 6 are extremely meaningful or just possibly, positioning between winning the group or finishing second. But this is an interesting time where I think you really want to win your group. I think that the draws will be interesting as we come through. if you look at the way that the draws came out here, I think it could be a very, very top-heavy round of 16 knockout stages because of so many powerful teams in the second pot.
How about you, Paul? Any like doubts about, I mean, advancing or at least or being number one?
I'm not really too worried about anything other than advancing. I'm not really worried about the seeding because I think you got to win. You got to go through some tough teams to win the whole thing anyway, right? I mean, and the way the pods kind of fell this year, there's going to be some tough teams right out of the gate, even if you're a 1 seed coming out. So, you know, to your point about resting and stuff, I don't think it would have mattered. I mean, I think we could have had this group locked up 4 games in, and Klopp's still going to field the same team. I mean, look what we did versus, you know, Midgetland. That game was a dead rubber. There was no reason. We could have played like essentially all our U23s, and it wouldn't have mattered, and we still put up like our starting, for the most part, our starting 11, and then people got hurt. So like, I just think that, man, Jurgen Klopp, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to play the same team. He's going to play all of our strongest players regardless, and then he's going to put all the kids out for the cups, like for the domestic cups. So, I mean, I think it just kind of is what it is in that regard.
What do you think, Gally? I mean, we kind of know, and it is, you know, obviously when that injury to Jota happened is, you know, you can also say, and I think that's Klopp's values having game minutes a lot more than a lot of the other coaches in terms of being game ready and having game minutes under your belt. And I think, you know, that's, I assume, at least, you know, without being in his head, that's why, you know, he does play these guys in games like that so that they have game time minutes under their belt. So when called upon in the Premier League, which is going to be a lot more physically challenging, they're kind of ready to go. It's not the same as just practicing. That's me being the devil's advocate. So, Gally, what do you say?
Well, I mean, one, I think you're probably somewhere in there right that he was playing Jota to give him more minutes and more experience, score more goals, and just get more embedded into the system for the Premier League challenge. I'll also say he was wrong in playing him in a game that didn't matter when we were starting to just be on the cusp of an injury crisis. It's okay, too, to say that the manager's wrong. He can still be one of the best managers in the world and make mistakes. And Paul's right. I think he plays the same team all the time. I do think he'll have to change that a little bit this year. They're cramming in matches. It looks like they're basically going to play 2 games a week for about 12 to 15 straight weeks again this year like they did last year. And I just think he's going to have to do some rotating. And they're going to jam in extra matches during international breaks like they are. I mean, now they're playing 3 in a week instead of 2. And I think you have to take that into account, or you might find these guys getting hurt. And I think it's important that they prepare. As we've always said, you know, he doesn't play a big squad. So you got to play at least the guys that you trust and rotate some of them here and there between the Champions League and the Premier League.
And I think we talked about that before in terms of, I mean, if you say, you know, one weakness or one maybe aspect of his management we do not like as much, because obviously, you know, I think any LFC fan has to, you know, love the guy for what he's done and what he continues to do, is that, you know, the rotation and managing a bigger squad. I mean, last episode we recorded, we had one more day left before, you know, the transfer deadline. We kind of figured nothing was going to happen, and nothing happened. So there's a lot of like, you know, doom and gloom people out there just waiting for injuries to happen. And when this Taki thing happened, everybody was all over that. Then Elliot happens, you know, like, I mean, we have, you know, you're going to have a certain type of fan that's either was really wanted the signings or really thinks we needed the signings. So any news that you're gonna kind of like trash. I mean, I'll be honest, I was hoping that we would get an attacker for depth, especially a winger for depth, but we did not see it happening, especially not being able to offload Divock and stuff like that. But then you see the depth charts, if used properly, it does look like we have a lot of quality. Where do you stand on that, Paul? Do you foresee, you know, the lack of depth, especially up front? I think we're definitely fine defensively and for midfield. you can't just plan on having like 8 injuries and build a squad like that. I mean, I think everybody's scared off of what happened last year, but I mean, there's no way, you're not gonna have like 8 center backs just in case 4 get injured and stuff like that. So, how confident are you, I guess, with this depth chart the way it is?
Yeah, so I'm with you. I would have preferred to see an attacker added too, and I know that that's probably surprising to some people because I've been very supportive of the window in general. I think a lot of people have this thing backwards, though. A lot of people are saying, like, well, FSG isn't opening up the purse strings, or not, like, giving Klopp the tools he needs to succeed. Klopp's probably, like, frustrated with FSG. I think, if anything, it's the other way around. I think that FSG probably wanted to add depth. I think they probably, like, wanted to add another player. And I think Klopp probably said, listen, until we figure out what we want to do with Taki Minamino, like, until we figure that out, and as long as we have Origi on the books, like, those are bodies that are going to be in front of whoever comes in, or are going to be an obstacle for whoever comes in. And so, like, my take on it is like, I think it's probably Jurgen Klopp that's saying, look, I've got these guys we got to figure out what to do with. I mean, we know Origi's probably not going to factor in much. But, like, that kind of is what it is. Nobody's going to come and match his wages. He's got a contract with us. He's going to run that thing down. But my suspicion is that Jurgen said, like, I've got plenty of bodies. I can work with what I have now. I'd rather have these 2 guys out before we add another player. That's just my take. But if you look at what he's done at Dortmund, all the way through, it's very consistent, and he always has a very, very tight, small squad. And I think that is, a major thing. Like, for me, like, I think that's a major reason that, like, we haven't added. I think it's also puts a ding in recruiting. I think a lot of these players, whether it's Daka, whether it's Rafinha, I think a lot of these players take a look at Liverpool and think, damn, that's a fun team. I'd love to play for it, but where are my minutes going to come from?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about like play like Rafinha, for example, who was rumored and probably would be, ideal type of addition with the Premier League experience and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, what would be in it for him exactly? I mean, the guy just got called up to the Brazilian national team, and he obviously needs to be on the field more to be able to. I mean, I'm sure, his dream is to be able to go to the World Cup with Brazil, and he's not going to get the exposure or credit for the performance sitting behind Mo and Mane and just basically being flex.
It's just common sense. Like, Daka sat down here with West Ham, Leicester, and Liverpool. It's widely reported he sat down with those 3 clubs. So he made a decision that Leicester was the best opportunity for him. So if you look at the verbiage that him and his agent are putting out, and you read between the lines, that can only mean one thing. Best opportunity means you're playing football. Like, so, like, and that's the only logical explanation that you can sort of arrive at.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, as Liverpool fans, we were always like, what the hell? Who wouldn't want to come in and play for Liverpool and stuff? But if you kind of put yourself in the kid's shoes, or his agents, in terms of, like, long-term value and long-term prospects, it's probably a smarter decision to start at a team like that. And then, I mean, I'm sure if I'm the agent, I'm saying, hey, go there, kick some butt. Leicester City is known to sell high when a player is doing well. They've done so in the past. And, that will be opportunity. If you really want to go to Liverpool, you can then by then Mo or Mane might be gone, or you might be a starter. Is probably what I would say if I'm the agent. But Gally, who was infamously harsh on Daka, right here on the podcast. So what do you make of the depth charts the way we are going in?
Well, I mean, I've made it clear I would have liked an attacker signed. I didn't think it would be a star player. I thought it would be a player good enough to probably supplant those 2 eventually as the 5th option. When your 4th option gets hurt or 3rd option gets hurt, pushing your 4th option up the depth chart, I think that makes it a little bit more of a heightened awareness. They weren't going to go overspend on deadline day. I never expected that. I don't know if Jurgen wants another attacker or wants his managing head of transfers to actually make sales sometimes for $1 million or $2 million less than his hard cold evaluations, because at some point you have to just cut the dead wood out and get rid of it so you can move on. And I understand that they wanted to get 18 from Wolves for Origi. Well, maybe they should have got 10 and got the wages off the books so that they could have signed a $60,000 a week player. But I will say this, we can't get caught up in, and I agree with all the points about Rafinha, but we can't get caught up with the idea of what do they have? You know what they have as a chance to come to Liverpool? They have a chance to play in the Champions League almost every single year. They have a chance to succeed and beat Mane out, who has been off the boil for basically 14 months at this point. If someone came to Liverpool as a right winger and put on their big boy pants and walked out on the pitch and earned the spot, and I think Harvey Elliott has proven in the beginning of this season, basically anyone can be beaten out for a job at Liverpool, and it will take a lot to beat Mane. But if Rafinha really wanted that job, he could come to Liverpool. So I think there will be a young player that bets on themselves that signs for this club in the next year and a half. I actually hope it is Rafinha. Have a great year at Leeds, set yourself up to go to the World Cup, and come in a year's time, because he looks the part of a player who creates and scores from the wing and has the speed and the ability to cut inside on both feet. And it just looks a perfect foil for what Jurgen likes to do.
I agree I definitely agree on Rafinha being a good fit to the system. I just don't, if I'm Rafinha, I just don't see the upside of joining Liverpool right now. Because I'm assuming, it's not his only option. Because, you mentioned Elliott, but, think of Elliott, one, his age, and two, it's kind of like, his opportunities are limited, and he's already here. So this is probably his best shot in terms of breaking it into a top, Premier League team. Or he would be signed by a lesser team and then he might make it there. But, if you're Elliott, I think the perspective is a lot more different than, play like Rafinha, who's already proven himself in the Premier League. And I think that's the thing, if we did sign somebody, I don't think it would have been anybody that's, these fans will be excited about, like, it wouldn't have been a big name. It would have been, like you're saying, Gally, with like a young kid that, we kind of know and stuff like that. And here's another thing, we know Klopp, anybody we sign, is not going to play for 2-3 months anyway. So aside from like the Bobby injury, that is still kind of like mysterious in terms of like what it is and how bad it is. Hopefully the other guys stay healthy and we can kind of like keep going, because we are entering the really tough part of the schedule. So, having said that, this is when I usually fall off the fantasy football world, when the games start coming thick and thin. So let's talk about fantasy football. More importantly, let's look at, like, real quick, Gally, you're like the master of fantasy football, supposedly. So you're in 10th actually in our league, tied with our the Polish Prince Mateusz from our American Scouser. And I am currently hanging in there in 31st with 221 points, right above Mr. Bickler, who has a measly 220 points. But yeah, my time will come to an end pretty soon over here, where I lose grip of the fantasy team. Gally, any suggestions? And more importantly, we don't care how your team is doing, but anybody who listens to the podcast regularly knows Bickler and I are a lot more invested in your wife Kelly's team. How is her team doing?
Yes, Kelly's squad Kloppback are hanging in there right now. I think they are probably right in between where I am, and they're in the league too somewhere. I don't know the exact position, but she's doing good. She's talking about what moves she's going to make. She's looking into it. The international break is a tough time for fantasy tinkers, especially people who play pretty regularly, because you got basically 2 weeks in between. And if you make too many moves or do things, it'll blow up in your face. Price changes happen. So it's kind of one of those annoying periods. It's also a period where the transfer window closes. And when players like Ronaldo and Lukaku and players like that move late in the window, it adds a lot and changes. So I think you'll see a lot of people using their wild cards and blowing up their teams on week 3, trying to chase points early. And normally that doesn't work out, but who knows? Maybe making a move on your team to get Ronaldo and Salah and Lukaku all at once makes sense, but not for me.
Yeah, I did just find Kelly. She's 54th right now with 210 points. Paul, how are you going to make up this huge point between us? And more importantly, how are we gonna...
I'm going to do exactly what Gally said people shouldn't do and probably throw a wild card in there and blow my team up. I mean, what do you mean?
It's the right thing to do.
The only question is Trent Arnold-Alexander worth £7 million? I don't know.
Say yes.
I just don't. I mean, I should this year at least go out with a bang and use all of them before the scheduler gets tight. There are midweek games, and I forget to change the lineup. And Gally, since you're the fantasy football guru here, can you explain to
I wouldn't go that far.
Bickler and I why the hell does fantasy football, fantasy soccer, whatever you want to call it, work like this? Where if you miss one game, you're shut for the entire week. Why can't you change people that were not involved? Kind of you can do with any other freaking fantasy sport.
Answer that.
There is no answer. There's no answer why you can't make substitutions after they happen. I mean, obviously, you shouldn't be able to put people into games if the match has already occurred. So if you miss them playing and they're on your bench, I don't think you should be able to put them in. I think the idea of the game originally wasn't that people would play it the way that they do with the daily maneuverings and the guys who take big negatives every week to try to get high scores and the fact that it's almost become a daily tinkering obsession of people. There's blogs invested to it and websites and paid services. It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest. It really is.
This is why you don't let the Brits run stuff, though. I mean, like there's a refusal to look at anything else and borrow from other fantasy sports that work. We have rules that don't make a lot of sense. There's a lot of like rigid tradition that's just rigid for the sake of tradition. This is essentially British imperialism just adopted in fantasy sports.
Well, they basically were like, listen, you people had Madden for 25 years as the best football game, as the best video game in the United States. We made sure FIFA took it over, and now soccer is the biggest game played by all your kids. And we're going to take over your fantasy football eventually too. That's going to take a long time here in the United States, though. But there are 7 million people playing this game across the world, which is pretty crazy.
So that's got to be the poll question of the week, though. Is Fantasy Premier League just an extension of British imperialism?
So Bickler's answer is fuck yes.
Paul is already bitter about the rules, and then you made him even more bitter by bringing up the topic of FIFA, which is really a sore spot for Paul. So let's not delve it any further. Just let the guy be.
We are on international break.
Hey, listen, I get down in the lower leagues where I belong. I get it. I know my place in FIFA.
Okay, so looking ahead to this weekend, hoping nothing more obnoxious happens during the international break, we're going to go away to Leeds. Tough place to play, tough team to play, especially physically. And I would think that's really going to kind of affect our decision-making in terms of like the starting 11. But Gally, let's start with you. Who do you have in your starting 11 against Leeds?
I think we'll go out with our strongest fit 11, and I think that'll consist. Now, are we banking on the pretense here that Allison, Fabinho, they're all playing, and that FIFA's not going to uphold the 5-day ban? I think then we have Allison playing our normal back four with Robertson and Trent, Matip and Verge, Fabinho, Henderson. I think we will probably see Thiago from the start. And then up front, I think you'll be looking at Mane, Jota, and Salah.
Yeah, I think when we talk about lineups, well, last year it was lack of options. We were like, which midfielder is going to play center back was the game we were playing. This year, I think the main challenge is the midfield, trying to figure out which midfield trio would go. Do you agree with that trio, Paul? I almost sense and I think that's why I kind of mentioned the fact that it is a really physical and a team that runs a lot. I almost sensed we could possibly see Milner out there.
Isn't Milner still hurt?
I thought he was back practicing. He's still
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, that's possible. Here's my fear. Like, I've got essentially the same starting 11. I'm not 100% sure we'll see Thiago off the bat, which leaves me with like Naby. And if Naby's like, my fear is Thiago is not 100% yet. He's not going to start. Naby's late getting back, or Naby's coming off international break. And you know that, like, Jurgen traditionally doesn't like to rush people right back after international break. So my concern is that we have a repeat of what we did last match, which I did not like, where Henderson plays on his weak side and you have Harvey Elliott on the right. And, like, my gut feeling is that's what we're going to see. We're going to see Hendo on the left, Harvey on the right, and Fabinho in the hole. And, like, I just do not like that. Like, Jordan Henderson has just not traditionally done well on that left side. He didn't last game. So what I'm hoping for is that Galley's right and Thiago is ready, and it's Fab, Thiago, Hendo, with Hendo on his normal right side. And if not, I would like to see Naby in there, Naby, Fab, Hendo. But, like, I've got this really, like, sick feeling that we're going to end up seeing Hendo on the left, Harvey on the right, and Fab in the hole.
How about Curtis?
His time's got to be coming soon. I just think he'll get the first cup game to start, and that'll be how he gets bled in, get minutes and game time. I mean, he was suspended for both of these under-21 matches, so he's with the team, but he couldn't even play for that silly red card he got in that match last year, so he had to have a 3-match ban. So he really hasn't played much at all outside of that closed door match they played a few weeks back to get guys' feet ready. I think the other thing that wouldn't have surprised me, except for I'm happy to see Scotland's third match is tomorrow. I wouldn't have been surprised if Tsimikas had gotten a start had Scotland played like Thursday, the way that some of the clubs or some of the countries are playing as close to Sunday's match. Because you know that Scotland's going to play Robo in all 90 minutes of all 3 matches in a week and run him into the ground. And I could have saw Klopp saying, you know what? No, we're giving you a week off. We're going to play the kid. He looked good. But I don't think that'll happen. With the fact that the match is tomorrow, I think that gives them plenty of time for a Sunday late afternoon kickoff. I think he will end up making the start for Robo. But I think that's something to watch. I think giving guys a little breather. They're playing a lot of football, and then they're going away playing more football while they're gone. It's kind of scary.
It has become kind of obnoxious, like their schedule. We used to only talk about, the Christmas period and stuff like that. Now it's like starts pretty much in September all the way through, it feels like. And I know it's a bit more congested than normal because of like the African Cup, but because the break is going to be extended and stuff a little bit, it feels like. But I feel like we might have, especially as we head into a World Cup, we might have a similar deal where we are missing a lot of top players from the World Cup due to injuries suffered, especially towards the tail end of the season, just for being freaking tired. I mean, they're running these guys into the ground. It can't be the way to go, but that's how the big money is made. So any takes from the international games that you guys had? I know, I mean, I could just go on and on about the Turkish national team and cry over here, or share my anger, but that only gets me so far. U.S. game, I know you guys obviously followed a lot closer than I did. I didn't get a chance to watch the game. Just kind of turned it on for a couple of minutes. That was it. But any hot takes on the international games, Gally? You're a lot more
the U.S. team
about international football than Bickler. So
the U.S. team was poor. Poor in their execution of what I would say were poor tactics and setup, especially. in the El Salvador match.
It's very unlike them.
What's that?
It's very unlike them.
I know. Yeah. It's amazing what happens when you put out a mediocre manager and ask them to basically uphold mediocre tactics. And sometimes they actually start players that are of the more mediocre status of the players that they have. Doesn't make any sense to me. I wasn't a fan of the Berhalter signing or hiring when they first announced him as manager, so I can kind of stand true to all my complaints. I just don't think as advanced as the players start to get in their individual games by playing at better clubs and countries, that he has a tactical awareness to put them together. And they might win a tournament here or there. They may, win a match against Mexico in penalties by making a few plays, but nothing will change as long as you're still trotting out guys like Tim Ream and playing 4-3-3 in a way where, it's dribble and drive. It's not 1990. You're not kicking it to the corner and beating people on grit and merit. You're American, but you no longer just have to beat people on sweat equity and hustle. Like, you have ball players who can actually play the game and are learning by some of the great minds in Europe. And you got to take advantage of it. And this guy can't. So I'm on my soapbox there because, it pained me not to have them in the last World Cup, even though I liked making fun of them and poking the bear. But it really bothered me. And it's going to bother me again if we got to slump into another match later this week. And I got to watch these guys kick the ball around and act like they have no idea how to put one in the net.
I find that odd, actually, that the two national teams, like the Turkish national team, is almost like on a similar boat. I feel like both of them have a lot of young quality talent that play on top teams in top leagues. And in both cases, it almost feels like a subpar manager who is kind of like, not with the current decade and current level the sport is played in, kind of like holding everybody back. And I would think, kind of like what you're saying, Gally, that having come from these top teams, it's almost more important now to have your national team coach be of a certain experience and stature, so when the guy comes to the national team, he listens to you as well. So what I mean, in terms of being respecting the coach and what they're saying, instead of saying, dude, what are you talking about? I play in the Premier League, I play here and stuff like that. So to be able to have a coach that's respected in terms of, career and, the resume as a whole, I feel like it's more important in teams like that. And that's what we can bring Dickler, who will just take this away for hours.
I'm so positive about the U.S. men's national team all the time. I think the problem that I have with the national team in general is that, and I'm not talking about the players, I'm talking about the actual, core of the fucking system. There feels like a sense of entitlement that's very American. We should be a world power because we're the United States. And, I think we got sort of fooled 15 years ago when we started making the quarterfinals of the World Cup. I think it was South Korea. Where we thought, oh, we're a national power. We can win a World Cup. We can be perennially in the top 5, across the world if we just improve our quality, if we just improve the quality of players. And, I think in a way we've gone backwards, because now I think we figured out the NCAA is not the best path for our youngest players. They should be overseas playing in other leagues from time they're 12 on up, just like all the other kids, if not younger over there. We figured that out, whether it's military kids with postage or we figured that out. And the quality is there. We're getting better players. But the problem is, the core of the U.S. men's national team hasn't changed. It's still the same bullshit that we've always had. And now we've got better quality players, but we don't have the management. We don't have the structure, and it's not dialed in. It's I just think that we've kidded ourselves into thinking that we should be a national power if we just have better quality in terms of players. Well, we figured out the quality of player doesn't matter if you don't know how to put a starting 11 out there that's cohesive, and we can't.
Yeah, the spine of the team just needs to be improved, and that's all there is to it. But let's also not go past, whistle past one of the key factors. We can rail on management. Paul's right. We can talk about whether or not the coach has enough experience to be coaching a team of this stature in the United States national team of a country of this size. But the team also doesn't have an identity because the team doesn't have a leader with a backbone and a spine. We've heard it's going to be Tyler Adams. It should be Weston McKennie. Pulisic's the best player. Reyna's up and coming. Stefan's the backup goalie here. You know, Serginho Dest picked America, and now it doesn't matter. You can give people Captain America nicknames, but if they don't do anything, the difference was Landon Donovan was the best player on the United States national team and the captain, and Clint Dempsey would grab someone by the throat and pull him to the ground, whether they were on his team or the other. So they had both leaders, the yapper and the guy who talked to the refs, and then the guy who got everything done. And they don't have either on this team. And they all want to take claim at that. And it's why they look like they don't know what's going on in El Salvador. And a guy with Weston McKennie's talent can get kicked out of the most important game for his country he ever had for breaking COVID rules. How does your second best player not be eligible to play against Canada unless you have real rot in the leadership of your setup? So you thought Bickler was the one who got negative when it came to the U.S. It kills me, man. I mean, you know, I'm a card-carrying member of the fan base that travels around the country and watches them play and, you know, has supported them when they were crappy before they were making runs to the World Cup in 2002. I mean, I was at the first World Cup here. I remember the 4th of July game and how bad the loss was. I mean, you know, I was a little boy and I fell in love with the national team then. And for them to have so much talent right now and go draw after the way they finished in Trinidad and Tobago over a year and a half ago, it just baffles my mind. Nothing has changed. It's Groundhog's Day all over again. And the best players don't even show up to play. At least back in the day, they just had bad hair and just kicked other people. They did. They had bad hair, and they kicked guys harder than the other guys. But they won some games, 1-0 on a late header, you know, by someone with a bad mop of hair.
Well, Bickler, I think we have found something to get Gally going. So I'm going to put this in my pocket.
I feel like a proud father right now.
Oh man, yeah, I'm gonna put this in my pocket. So anytime I want to get Gally going, I'm just gonna bring this out because I don't see a lot changing. So I'm sure I can just bring it up.
Greg Berhalter. That's the fuse.
Meanwhile, you mentioned Dempsey, who I hated with a freaking passion. Top 5 hated footballers of all time, and just to think that he could almost be a Liverpool player just makes me cringe. So that was close, people. Thank you, Hendo, in more ways than one. So before we part, and we should be able to from now on do our video as long as with our post match. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can always like watch the video. I don't know why you would want to see us, I guess, but you know, if you really want to and see the visuals and stuff like that and see how mad Gally gets as he talks about the U.S. national team, which is worth watching, I'm gonna have to say. You can always check out the YouTube channel or actually our Facebook page. But before we leave, gentlemen, let's get some score predictions for the Leeds game. What are we anticipating? Gally, we will start with you.
All right, I'm gonna go 1-3 Liverpool win.
I actually like that. Well, any Liverpool win I would like, but Bickler, what do you have?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my score, so I will go 3-2 Liverpool.
Yeah, I'm, as always, not going to be as optimistic, but I do think this is hopefully a game where we can have actually Leeds come at us and like hit him on the counter when we need to and kind of win this. I go with 3-1 as well, actually, hoping we get 3 points. And then it's, like I say, it's a tough period starting over here, so it will be good to start it as a streak and kind of like calm down the fan base. I just don't know if the fan base that is not happy or constantly paranoid or whatever it is. I thought I was the pessimist till I see these guys. I don't know if they're just louder than the rest, and the calm, collected ones are just like waiting. But I just sense like a lot of, because of this transfer window, and the fact that we didn't do a lot of business, because we did do a lot of business in terms of moving some people out and loans and stuff like that. But and obviously a lot of like extensions. But the lack of signings make a lot of people very nervous. I think. Really think it's based off last year more than anything else. But a win would be huge. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. And Gally, when does US play again? Oh man, I'm gonna love this.
I don't even. I think it's Wednesday or Thursday night. I don't even know. I don't even know if I can watch it. Honestly, it's back down. Was it Costa Rica? I think it's down in South America or Central America, which means that they're just going to play terrible. They're going to be on some wobbly pitch. They'll be ready to make excuses. I mean, they basically have used every single excuse to be used, from travel to restrictions to rules to COVID to wobbly pitches. They actually complained about a fire alarm going off in their room in the hotel. Like, yes, that's what happens in these countries. Like, they know what hotel you're staying in. They fire off the fire alarm at 3:00 in the morning. Like, get over yourself. But
the fire alarm brings back fond college memories where we used to get up at like 2 in the freaking
morning. Can you imagine claiming that losing an hour of sleep is the reason that you couldn't beat a team that was so inferior to you to begin with, quality wise? Like,
They joked that one suburb of Dallas had as many residents as the greater sector of people that they could choose from that qualify for the El Salvador team.
I will have to say I did love their atmosphere in the stadium, though. I just turned it on and only watched for like 5-10 minutes. And speaking of like FIFA leagues, the guy who actually commissions the FIFA league I'm in is from El Salvador, and he was actually saying like this is huge for them, like this is their year, I mean, like this game is their year, is a huge deal for him. We were kind of talking about club over country and stuff like that, and he was mentioning for El Salvador this home game against the US was like huge for them, and you could kind of tell by the atmosphere they created. I thought it was like really cool to be able to see that stadium like that.
It was an amazing atmosphere. It was also filmed as if the guy who runs your men's soccer league was filming one of your matches. I felt like I was watching a match from a college game where the wire was going to drop in any moment, and then out of nowhere the camera was just going to fall to the side. Like, we got 3 angles. It was the only thing that I thought would make Tim lower was when the dead angle, and you could tell people like both the referee and the opponent were out running him down the sideline. Yeah, it was a bad look for the United States men's national team.
Yeah, I don't know, somebody sent this quote, I don't know if it was you, Bickler, that it looked like somebody's parent was just like recording and streaming it to everybody. It was just bad. It was bad. But okay, gentlemen, we'll call an episode here. Hopefully next week we'll be talking about a victory against Leeds and getting ready for the Champions League against Milan. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Don't forget to join us next week where we're recording live again every Monday evening. And just join us with your comments, suggestions, ideas, whatever it may be. See you guys next week.